Yeah, it's always been described as a cottage industry, right? You put your shingle out, you do good work, and for the most part, I think if you're a good practitioner, word of mouth keeps you going, right? And I don't think that will ever change. I don't care if you're part of a DSO or if you're part of a single practice. I think that's a reality because patients fear. I mean, it's one of the least favorite things to do is to go to the dentist. But if you have somebody that you trust, that helps. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a reality that will never change. And that's sort of the art of dentistry, right, not the science of dentistry or the business of dentistry.
Gino, how you doing? Welcome to the ZeroBalance Podcast.
I'm excited to be here. Yeah, thank you.
Very excited for this. We are here at Dykema 2025 in Denver. Another year, another Dykema.
Yep.
And we had the opportunity with the Quanta team last night. It was awesome. We got a chance to go to the baseball game.
Yep.
It was kind of like a pre-Dykema, get to know everybody and all of that. But really excited to have you. I know just in talking to John and the Quanta team, I know they really appreciate you, a lot of the work that you've done over the years. And so I thought that's kind of where we'd start. Maybe have you just share a little bit of your background. I'd love to kind of get your insight on dentistry. And then I know that you've been in this evaluation stage with the Quanta suite and stuff, which we'll get into. But let's start with you.
All right. I have about 30 years in the industry. Started off with mostly products and services like orthodontics, dental implants, cosmetic dental, sales, marketing, education, and got involved with a lot of the key opinion leaders. So I've been very blessed over the years to be part of the industry. And I feel like I'm not a dentist, but most of the products I've represented, I feel have contributed to sort of better oral health for people. So it's very rewarding to be part of this industry, whether you're on the product side or whether you're on the operations of the practice, which I migrated over to. And I've, the past 7 years, been sort of working with DSOs and running DSOs. So that part is pretty exciting as well.
So CEO of Workwell.
Yep.
Workwell, right? And what's that been like, to when you look back at where you started and to now be doing this and to be in that position? Yeah,
it's, when you work for companies like Straumann or 3M, there's just really excellent corporate foundation processes in place. And when you work for a multi-site DSO, that's not an enormous one, it's the structure is different, and you have to sort of be able to adapt to that. So, for me, the biggest challenge is the employees, because it's usually small locations with a handful of employees, and if one person calls out sick, it messes up the whole day for everybody else and the patients. So that part is a big challenge. And in the industry right now, hiring folks to work in dental practices, whether they're doctors, hygienists, or staff members, that's an ongoing sort of challenge for everybody. Doesn't matter how big your DSO is.
What has it been like for you, Gino, to run that organization? And like you mentioned, you have a lot of years in dentistry, but to not be a dentist, is there anything that you felt like you've needed to do? Like, how has that relation worked with the clinicians? I'm always just curious from that perspective.
Very early on in my career, it's an interesting question. I sold orthodontic products, and I went to the dental school because you sort of show your products off to a resident, and then when they graduate, you hope they're going to buy from you. And what I learned immediately is they would raise their hand, and I thought they would be asking me questions about products I was trained on, but they would ask questions like, if you were going to open up a practice, what part of Northern Virginia would you do it in? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe Manassas? And then they would keep asking questions that were related to preparation for when they graduated. And this was a little bit before DSOs really started taking off. So I went down to the dean's office and I said, could I get your third-year orthodontic residents for a day and go on a field trip? And he's like, what would you do with them? And I said, well, they're asking a lot of questions. And I had a decent amount of customers. And so I said, I'd like to bring them to a startup, something that's sort of mid-level, one that's really peaking, and then one that's sort of transitioning. And I think they'll learn a lot from that because they're thirsty for that kind of knowledge, and they don't get that in dental school.
Right.
So the dean of or the head of the ortho department got up from his desk. I thought he was going to kick me out, but he shook my hand and he's like, yes, you can do that. The only caveat to it is they have to come back and talk to the rest of the residents about what their experience was like. So I learned early on that if you do more than sell the product and help them, then they see that as a partnership, because they go to school to be dentists or oral surgeons, but they're not taught the business acumen, and so they're thirsty for it. So if you show any help, it makes an enormous difference. And so I got invited to their graduation. I think I was the first sales rep ever to get invited to like the orthodontic graduation. So I took that as an honor.
Yeah.
And kept doing that thereafter.
Yeah. Well, and I would imagine, like you mentioned, you carry that on, that dean was relieved.
Yep.
'Cause I'm sure like they get asked those questions a lot.
Yep.
And I'm sure they can answer some things, but to your point, actually show them what it looks like. And we hear that a lot. We've heard that traditionally over the years, that when they're in dental school, they're not getting that business training. And then yet in a lot of cases, then they, if they're running their own practice, they don't go to a DSO. They have to kind of figure that out on their own.
Even when they're established.
Yeah.
I lived in Richmond. I had a customer in Wilmington, Delaware. It was like a 4.5-hour drive. And I would go once a month. He was a key customer. And we would meet at a diner at 7 in the morning. And he would have a yellow lined sheet of paper with all my to-do items. And I would say, well, Dr. So-and-so, I'll say, could I get that? No, it's better if you write it down. You'll learn it and you'll do it. And I was like, So I did that for like 3 months. And I took it. And I was like, okay, this is how he operates. The fourth time I went up, he did his list. And I said, oh, okay. I said, do you have your pen? Because I have one for you. And I think I stopped him in his tracks, because he just looked at me. He goes, you have one for me? And I said, yeah. I said, this is the number I call when I call your office. I said, that's your practice number, yes? Right? I said, well, every single time I call, no matter what time of the day, thank you for calling Dr. So-and-so's office, please hold. And I looked at him and I said, that's perfectly fine for someone like me who's a salesperson, right? Put me on hold because, I'm a salesperson. And he's like, yeah. I go, do your referrals call that number too? And he said, yes. And all of a sudden, like, you could see like the blood, like he just went white. He's like, wow, I never thought of that. Yeah. And he's like, well, what would I do? And I said, well, I was a fan of Batman as a kid, the TV show. I said, and whenever they needed Batman, they called the bat phone. I said, you need a second line. Yeah. And it's just a simple thing, right? And he did it the next day. And he thanked me for it. And the next time I went up, he didn't have anything on his list. He's like, what else you have for me? So that's where I really...
They're hungry for it. They're hungry for it.
They are hungry for it.
Yeah. Love it. I'd love to ask you, in your career, what are a couple of the things that have drastically changed in dentistry? And what are some things that are pretty much still the same?
Yeah, it's always been described as a cottage industry, right? You put your shingle out, you do good work, and for the most part, I think if you're a good practitioner, word of mouth keeps you going, right? And I don't think that will ever change. I don't care if you're part of a DSO or if you're part of a single practice. I think that's a reality, because patients fear. I mean, it's one of the least favorite things to do is to go to the dentist. But if you have somebody that you trust, that helps. And so I think that's a reality that will never change. And that's sort of the art of dentistry,
right,
not the science of dentistry or the business of dentistry. So I think that's real. But certainly the trend, two things, technology and the DSO reality is something that is converging upon dentists. And I think they struggle, partly because most dentists think that their practice is worth probably 5 times more than it is, and so, and they're not really prepared to sell, because it's like selling a house. You've got to stage it right, and you got to make sure you fix things that don't turn people away. And so that's something that's a constant. So that's really challenging. And then technology is one of those things that's like all of us. If we go to the Apple store and we buy a new laptop, and then 2 years later or a year and a half later, it's got more bells and whistles, we have buyer's remorse, right? And we want the new stuff. And so I think dentists are also reluctant to make investments in technology because they don't know what's going to be available in 3 to 6 months. So, and then on the flip side of that, they also find themselves buying things that they shouldn't buy. There's, I call it the buyer's remorse closet in a dental practice. It's like, hey, show me that closet where you put things that you bought that you know you're never going to use.
Yes.
And they all have them. So, yeah. Does that answer your
Absolutely. Question? Yeah. Well, it's interesting. When I think about technology and I think about how that has changed the practice, I get a chance to talk to a lot of people and clinicians, and I like to get their perspective on how the patient has changed. Meaning, I know in a lot of dental practices, we've always wanted the patients to take their oral health seriously, as serious as, the clinicians do.
Yep.
It does seem like with more information out there on the internet and more technology, that patients are coming into practices now a little bit more armed than they were.
Yeah.
And not only that, but then having with the practices that have the technology, whereas maybe it didn't matter so much in the past, I feel like it's starting to matter more, almost in the sense of like maybe a patient making a decision to work with a practice.
I think you're right. I think one of the things that has happened too is that slowly but surely, patients have realized that dental insurance isn't the end all be all.
Yeah.
Right? It's a sort of work benefit. And sometimes it's decent and sometimes it's not. But your oral health does matter. And I think in the past 10 years, more so in the past like 3, this effort to educate the patient on the connection between oral health and the rest of your body is something that I hadn't seen, but it's so important because if you don't have good oral health, it can affect systemic conditions like diabetes and cancer and heart disease and pregnant women. Like there's so many things that are tied to good oral health. And I think that the community is doing a better job. And, again, with the internet, patients can research that. And they come in, like you say, armed with questions and they're prepared and they want to understand. So, yeah.
I had an opportunity 2013 for a couple of years, a couple different stints to work at Mortensen DSO in Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
And I had a wonderful experience. I loved the leadership team there. I loved the practices that I worked with. And so as someone who has been in the industry for 20 years, both on the product side like you and then worked in the DSO, I got to see a different side of it.
Yep.
And there is, as you know, and can tend to be this negative connotation with the DSO space. My experience was positive. The way that I always looked at it, Gino, was that being able to serve more patients, if you could utilize that model to serve more patients,
right,
and those practices had more support to be able to be better clinicians and the like, I always saw that as the positive side.
Yeah.
With the work that you've been doing the last however many years, with the DSO, talk about that a little bit from your vantage point, because you also started on the product side, like I did, before the DSOs were there. And so now, in your role, like what's...
Well, it's funny. People always say everyone should be a waiter or a waitress so that you understand.
Yes.
Right? And I think working in a dental practice, operationally or whatever the responsibility is, you see it through a different lens, right? You're not the person trying to sell a product to get in there to, put more in that closet, so to speak, that they're probably never going to use. But the truth, I think the truth of the matter is the DSO sort of, I don't know, people have a disdain for it if they're in private practice. It's a little bit of an unknown, and it also goes back to the fact that they didn't get training on business topics. And quite frankly, they just want to be clinicians. They want to treat patients. They don't like or want to be responsible for I mean, some do, a few do.
Yes.
But for the most part, they just want to do what they went to school for. And so there is a need for this. And DSOs have done an outstanding job sort of filling that gap. And the challenge with it is when you take people who are sort of strong business minds saying, here's how you're successful.
Right.
Here's how you grow. Here's how you're profitable. Right. Here's how you lead people. Those are all very, very important things. But again, when you're the doctor in the operatory and someone's sort of sending you a spreadsheet once a month or what have you, or sometimes once a day on how you're tracking on that crazy acronym KPI, it's unnerving to them. Yeah. And so that's where I think some of the negativity comes from. And then it trickles down to staff members because they're like, oh, you don't really care about patients, you just care about money. And that's not really the case. I mean, you said it, like access to care. If you can see more patients and you can be more efficient at what you do, then you can take care of more people. I mean, there are practices that I've worked with that, they do a nice job, and as a result, they pair off a portion of their time to do pro bono work or take care of people that can't afford dentistry. And that's, again, that's admirable. And that happens in DSOs. I see it all the time.
Yeah.
So you got to give DSOs credit for that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's why I wanted to ask that, because on the other side of it, I also feel like we're in 2025 and practice owners have a choice. I feel like there are more resources now, like you mentioned, that if you are a practice owner that wants to own your own practice, maybe you have one or two, you don't want to be a part of a larger DSO, you have more resources than you ever did. Maybe you are business-minded, you have those resources. It does feel like the pendulum is swinging back to where now the industry is kind of settling in, where it's like, okay, it's like a younger person in some regards coming out of college that has a decision, do I want to start my own business or do I want to go work for a company? And there really is no right or wrong answer. It's what's good for that person.
Yeah, it's funny, on the news this morning, they interviewed a 20-year-old kid who decided not to go to college, but saw that there was an opportunity to have work boots made in the United States. And he went to the shoe manufacturer trade shows, and he learned about the industry, and he found the ones that were making it in the U.S., and they were very open and showing them how. And so he decided he was that was his pathway, and his parents supported him with that. And now he's off and running, super successful. And it's 20-year-old kid, right? Pretty amazing. I think at this point, because there's so many companies that have been established to sell to the DSOs, those services are now available to a dentist. If they don't want to join a DSO, they can select, here are my soft spots, so I need to get somebody to help me with something like revenue cycle management.
Right. Completely. So we were talking last night with yourself and John Krummenhoek, and he referenced this card that you carry.
Yeah.
So I'd love to take this opportunity to have you tell the story behind that, and maybe even show it if you could pull it up, and love to know the history of that.
So this is what I'll say. The genesis behind it was going, and I did a lot of trade shows and education events where doctors got up and for the first 5 minutes or 10 minutes they talked about where they went to school and the things they did and what they published and the research, and it just went on and on and on ad nauseum. And I was like, God, there's got to be a better way to put that out there for people. And if I ever have to sort of say, here's my background, I don't want to have bullet items for 6 slides where people are already leaving the room, right? So I'm a visual learner. And so I thought, well, it'd be kind of nice to give them something visual. So, I don't, this is it. I mean, this is.
Yeah, there it is.
If you're going to zoom in on that.
Yeah.
Just for a second, and then I'll walk you through it, I guess.
So I can see from here, I see 3M, I see the Celtics logo, I see Ralph Lauren.
Yeah. So can I pull it back now, or do you need me to?
Yeah, you're
is
good.
That right? So so I start off with a picture of John F. Kennedy because I was born in '63, and he was assassinated in '63. So I say, that's how I started, and then Italian flag, because both my parents are Italian. I'm Italian American, and I talked about for me the importance of that, especially with my grandparents immigrating to the United States. And then I have all 4 Boston sports logos, because I think if you're born and raised in Boston and you're not a fan of all 4 of those teams, somebody will hurt you. So you kind of have to be. And then there's a picture of a nun, because my parents decided that it was good for me to go to parochial school for 12 years.
Okay.
And so I have a fear of nuns. And I think my mom always said, it's good because this is where you get your discipline, right? The fact that, you were a good student is because if you weren't a good student, you'd probably get hit with a yardstick or something. And then there's a picture of a newspaper parcel bag, because my first job was delivering newspapers. And I think that's where I learned about work ethic, right? You get up early. You make money based on how many houses you hit, right?
Yeah.
And then I was also, because of my parochial school upbringing, I parlayed the Sunday church Sunday paper, just stand there and sell them as people were coming out of church. So that was a big win for me, right? But it goes on, and it talks about education. And my wife and I met at Ralph Lauren. I got a job as a part-timer because I needed the discount to buy suits.
Got it.
And she was the women's department manager. So I always say, I married her. She was my boss then. She's my boss now. That's how I talk about it. And then all the company logos are the companies I've really been fortunate to work for. And, I fortunately fell into the dental industry. I was in medical sales, did not like it. Went to a baseball game in Baltimore, a Red Sox doubleheader, and the guy sitting in front of me was orthodontic sales rep. And we just got to talking, and he's like, hey, we need somebody where you live. You should come ride with me, blah, blah, blah. And he started talking to orthodontists, and I was, at the end of the day, I'm like, do they all really talk to you like this? Like, you sit across the table, you can actually have time with them? He's like, yeah. And I said, I want in. And so there was no turning back from there. And so I was lucky enough to be in dental implant sales, cosmetic sales, worked for a number of great companies and great leaders. So I just think that moment in Baltimore where I decided to jump in the direction of dental I feel so blessed and fortunate for that moment to have happened. Because I don't know where I would be today otherwise.
Yeah.
So
I love that, and I might steal that idea, but I will reference you. I think that's classic, right? To be able to kind of put that up on the screen.
Yeah.
Do you find that, I mean, it's nice, right? You get to know that's a great way to tell a story more often.
Yeah, and it
just the
changes.
bullet points.
Every time I'll emphasize one thing over another.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't talk about the fact that I have, was it Neil Armstrong walking on the moon?
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, that was also a moment in my life where it's like, I can dream too.
Yeah.
Like, if you can do that, you could probably put your mind to it and do anything. Yeah. So, yeah, I just think, and again, people will come up to me and they'll be like, hey, that was really interesting that you did that. Now, if I start going 5 minutes in, then I realize, like, oh, geez.
It's the same thing except just with pictures. Yeah.
Right. So I got to pull that back and be like rapid fire. So
I love it. Yeah. All right. So you mentioned revenue cycle management a little bit. I want to kind of get into some of the work that you do now, and then more importantly, this evaluation phase that you have had with Quanta. Before we talk specifically about Quanta, I'd just love to have you, we were talking a little bit about technology and some of these gaps and holes that practices have needed to fill and how the technology is helping these practices do that so that they can continue to provide better care.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is, again, I go back to patients for the most part coming in with sort of, they're edgy and nervous, right? They don't want to be there. So you do have to have somebody sort of greeting them, making them know we're glad to see you, and it's going to be okay. Yeah. So the human side of that is paramount. But then the other portion of it is like, hey, look, if I can go to Target and I can scan everything myself and make that transaction easy, or what I've learned about like Walmart is now going to have like scanners in their carriage and no longer self-checkout, but everything you get, you could, like, the technology is there to make your experience easier. And I think that's important. So for a patient, is there an open table version of going to the dentist? Can I go online and book a table at the time I want for the kind of cuisine I'm looking for? That's got to happen, right? And it's getting there, right? And then once you sort of book it and know you're coming in, I think the rest of it is complete care. Like, I don't want to hit and run, and I also don't want to be like sold on things I don't need, because I've been to dentists where I felt that. Like usually the whole family goes to the dentist, and, I'll come home and I'll be like, hey, did you get hit up for such and such? And my wife will be like, yeah, did you? And I'm like, yeah. I go, it must be like flavor of the month. So you can tell when they're doing that, right?
Yeah.
But then the rest of it is just sort of the transactional aspect of it. So whether it's paying your bill, right? Or if you want to do something that's going to cost a little bit more money and you need financing, like what options do I have? All of those things are important. And I think also technology today, if I could give props to another company, I think Overjet, which is an AI company that takes an x-ray, and doctors will show you the x-ray and say, oh, you have a cavity here, or you need a filling or a crown. And I'm looking at shades of gray going, I don't know what you're looking at, but okay, if you say so, I'll trust you. Yeah. Overjet's been able to take that and red, yellow, green it. So you can look at all your teeth and see, like, these are in good shape because they're green. These are yellow. We need to keep an eye on it. And this is red. We need to address it right away, or it's going to become a lot worse. And so that's what people need, because I'm not a dentist. Right. Even though I've been in the industry and I probably, keep up with most of the dental lingo, I still want to be able to understand it as a novice, if you will, that goes to the dentist twice a year, right? And I think that's where technology is taking us, and that gap needs to be filled. But people pull back, and I mean, I've been at it for a while. I remember when digital X-rays first became available, dentists did not invest in it. They still sort of took the films and went in the dark room, and it's like, man, you have an opportunity to do this, and you're still doing this. Yeah. So those are just some examples, I would say.
I like to use the analogy often of dentistry and comparing it to getting our car worked on when you talked about trust.
Yep.
If you don't understand your engine and you're waiting there and you're kind of holding your breath, and just like when the dentist or the hygienist is working in your mouth and you're just kind of nervous. Okay, what are they going to tell me is wrong? Because I can't see anything.
Yeah.
And if you don't know and understand it, that trust has traditionally been low. and then they share that with you. And if you do trust them, you've been there many times, and you can feel more comfortable. And that's what I do get excited when you mentioned like Overjet and AI, like in that capacity, that trust is there.
Yeah, and when you reference cars, like I'm I have an Audi and I love it, and I go to the dealership, and they do the same thing. They give me sort of an Overjet version, where all the aspects of my car are red, yellow, green. And so the last time I went, they were like, so we're going to replace your front brake pads because you need them. And I'm like, what about my back ones? Nope, they're still yellow, you're fine. So, and I'm like, you sure? Because I don't mind doing all of them because, I don't want my brakes to fail on me. But they're like, no. So I trust that, right? Because everything is based on millimeters, and they're like, here are the measurements. So then I know they're not like sort of BSing. And it's a very formal document that I get, and I can read through it and feel good that, what they're saying is accurate and based on, true numbers.
When you hear the term revenue cycle management with your business mind and the position that you're in, what does it typically make you think about?
I think it's, again, anything with cycle is a beginning and an end, right? So when I think of revenue cycle management, I think of that, the beginning and the end. And I think of patients coming in, whether they're a brand new patient or whether they're an established patient, they're coming in. And typically they either have or don't have treatment already in the system, like recommended treatment. And maybe because of finances or time, they never followed through. But when you come in the door, it's like, oh, you're here for your cleaning, but you're also getting a filling. But did you know you needed 2 crowns, right? And so that's the beginning of it. That's sort of, and we have huddles in the morning and say, Mrs. Jones is coming in today, and here's what she needs. But this is what she's scheduled for. So it's, even though we're not going to see her for another 6 months, we should let her know that. So we know what the potential revenue is, right? And again, it's not the almighty dollar. It's also sort of a responsibility. Because if you let it prolong and it gets worse, if I'm a patient, I'm like, why didn't you tell me?
Right.
Right? But it's good to look at that from a treatment plan standpoint, but also here's the production at hand today. And then once the patient does go through whatever they choose to go through, then it's all about how do we collect the money. If it's insurance and it has to be filed, it's always good to get it pre-approved. Again, I'll use Overjet as the example of if we need a crown, and like companies won't approve a crown unless there's so much decay, right? That proves it. It's scientific. So you usually get a response quicker from the companies going, oh, you sent us an Overjet file. That's really accurate. We green light that crown. Right, so that's part of the revenue cycle, right? And then whatever the insurance covers is one thing. Whatever the patient has to cover is another thing. And do you collect that money up front, or do you pay for it net 30? That all is part of the process. And I think we all get bills every day in the mail, or just about. And it's like, however you deliver that and make it easy, then the likelihood is you're going to be able to get paid over other things. So I think one of the really good things about Quanta is that they do that. They have that intention of making it easy and adapting to where patients and consumers are today. If you send me a bill and it's a text message and all I have to do is like click, 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 then that makes my life easy. Yeah. Right? I'm not going to write a check, put it in an envelope and get a stamp, right? That's what I want to do. And so practices need to do that.
Yeah. It's interesting because hearing you talk about from the time that the patient comes into the practice, they're already on edge.
Yep.
All the work that everybody in the practice has had to do to get them through that process, get them into the chair, do whatever work they need to do, have the conversation, share with them sometimes information that is not always easy to hear,
right.
Present treatment, then they do the treatment when you talk about this cycle and you're like, okay, check, so we're doing good. And then like you said, if you get to the end where they have to, the payment or the billing, and you do all those good things and then that becomes a roadblock, it could almost kind of defeat that entire experience. So I love how you kind of bookend that, right? Is how important that is at the end and utilizing technology to be able to, because a lot of times, Gino, back to what patients are coming into dental practices now, we all are patients / consumers, and we're utilizing these companies outside of a dental practice. Yeah. And we're utilizing this technology. And I feel like now the demand of a patient wanting and expecting that in the dental practice is going up quickly. Yep. And for those practices that don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be embarrassed now. But as you said that, I was thinking of my my general practitioner, right? My doctor that I go to once a year. And it used to be like, at my age, there's certain things they have to do to make sure everything's in working order and it's not comfortable. Do I have to go any further? Probably not.
No, you don't. We're good.
And then you come back and it's like, and then you're like, oh, I'm prepared for that again. Do we have to do that? And he's like, no, we got blood work now that tells us that. And I'm like, are you kidding? Oh, it's fantastic. So like, sure, I'll get the blood work. No problem. It's a lot better than the alternative.
Yes.
So yeah, things evolve over time and technology changes things. And as long as your caregiver is committed to embracing that technology and the sort of new approach and understanding you as a consumer, that's important. And the other part of it that's important is that it's a win for that patient. But in dental practices, you can spend money on marketing. You can do the Google word search, try to get people driven to your website for new patient exams and stuff. But word of mouth is still the most important part of a dental practice. If people leave there and go tell their friends that they had a good experience, then other people will want to go there.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you go to a restaurant and you have a great meal and you're like, oh my gosh, we went to the best restaurant this weekend, and everybody else is like, I want to go there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So.
Love it. Two last things. The first is your experience on the rep side when you started and helping dental practices. What are some of the things that you look for now in the DSO when you're looking to work with a company, a vendor? What are some things that are important to you that obviously are also important to your clinicians and the entire team in the dental practice? But I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Follow through is super important, right? Because having been a salesperson but being a customer, if you come to me with something that's even remotely interesting to me, but I have 2 or 3 questions, and then you come back to me again to have me buy, but you didn't address the 2 or 3 questions that I had that were, hey, this is important. Can you get back to me on this? That's a done deal. I'm not going to move forward, right? So I think companies have to equip their salespeople with that ability to be able to gather information, because you're never going to have all the answers, but you should be able to commit to that.
Yeah.
I think that's super important. And if your company does 8 things super well, but there's one thing you're still working on, be honest about it, right? Don't sort of gloss it over, because I think that that can leave a bad taste in people's mouth over whether or not they move forward. So those 2 things, I think, integrity is really what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So was there a part 2 to that? I'm sorry.
Well, no, part
At
2 is
my
I just wanted to wrap with, when you look at the next couple of years of dentistry, what are you most excited about?
Wow. I think I'm most excited about where the experience is going to go for patients on a couple of fronts. One, just ease of coming in and going through the process of being a patient. But I think moreover, the technology today for patients in terms of dental care is getting better and better and better. I mean, like, I started selling dental implants many, many years ago, and it wasn't standard of care. Like, regular crown and bridge dentistry was standard of care, and now I really believe it is standard of care, and it's better for a patient. And so that, to me, that reality is good, because the more I learn about the oral systemic health connection, whatever we can do to make people's oral health the best it can be, then I think it's sort of like, blue zone people. Yeah. Like, they live a long time. And I think good oral health will help people live a long time.
It's like dentistry is finally getting its due, Gino.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like
exactly.
Post-COVID and the connection of the oral systemic link and patients recognizing that, and more patients wanting to become healthy.
Yep.
I mean, I, like you, spent time in dental practices, and just the over and over and over of the clinicians and their team educating patients on how important it was to do these things. And as patients, you hear it, you walk out, it's hard to build those habits, but hopefully that's kind of where we're going. And like you mentioned, I think the technology really aids that.
I think again, as we wrap here, I think we all have to sort of work together to that end. And when you mentioned COVID, it struck something in me that I was not working for well over a year when COVID happened. But I had a friend who was a periodontist, and we both were like, you got to keep people together, because everybody's panicked, right? if there was this chart that said, what's the safest job of being a lumberjack in Vermont, right? Well, of course, you're out in the woods. You're not going to be around anybody, right? What is the highest risk job? It was being like a dental hygienist or a dentist because you're right in the mouth, right? And that was scary. So I remember we just did these Zoom meetings and anybody could chime in. We thought at first we could make a business out of it, but it was like more about helping people. And in the beginning, it was about safety. How do you reopen and create a safe environment for your employees and for the patients alike, right? So there was, you probably will remember, there was, wait in your car, we'll call you when you're ready, that kind of thing. And then as time went on, when people opened up, it's like, now how do you bring back your sort of revenue and profitability with limited capabilities? And when will you get to that point where you can sort of be humming again? All of that was something that I learned. I didn't realize that dentists were, in a precarious situation because a month of being closed could put them out of business for good.
Completely.
So anything we can do to help, each other, I think is important.
Yeah. Well, Gino, thank you so much. I know the Quanta team really appreciates you taking the time to do this. Congrats on all your success and everything that you're doing.
Yeah, you guys, you have a great team. I really enjoy interaction. Again, you see it sometimes where there's like hierarchy, but your group is like sort of all at the table, no stripes, and that's really nice. So
awesome.
Congratulations to you and all the best.
Enjoy the rest of Dykema.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gino.
See you.